Welcome to another edition of the Wrestling Retrospective podcast, part of the Earnestly podcast. I'm your host, Earnest EJ Christian, coming to you, actually recording this on March 16th, 2025. We're doing another watch along here. It is the anniversary, of course, of the old school 34th year anniversary of Wrestlemania 6, and here joining us here today to do a watch along of the main event is, of course, 1/3 of the Minor podcast, frequent flyer here, Earnestly podcast, of course. My man Rob the Genius with us. My man, how you doing, brother?
Good to be back.
Yes, another watch along, another old school setting. I love doing these anniversary episodes, especially too. Also, I know you and I and DJ just did one a few weeks back of the Royal Rumble of 1990, which was the lead up to this match when we watching along here between Hogan and Warrior. For some stats here for you guys here. This, of course, this event, WrestleMania 6, took place on April 1st, 1990 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The attendance was 67,678 at Skydome. The tagline, of course, was the Ultimate Challenge. All right, as I always ask Rob, every time we do these little watch-alongs on April 1st, 1990, what was little Rob doing back then? Was little Rob Big Rob at this point now?
I was medium. I was 15 years old. I was in high school, and at that point, me and two buddies of mine always got together, and we would get together and watch the pay-per-views. Usually not live, but we would sometimes live. We'd all get together, and we were going to house shows. One of our parents would take us. We were doing that around then. And this was actually the first WrestleMania that I watched live as it happened.
Wow.
I'd always watched later on VHS or something. And this one, we all went to what was a place, the Capitol Center. It was an arena in PG County.
Bullets.
Yes, the Bullets played there. The Capitals played there. It's been torn down since then, and that is also where we used to have high school graduations. So when I graduated from high school, I got to walk through the tunnel while they were playing Macho Man's theme music, "Pump and Circumstance." So imagine how I felt doing that.
Yeah. What year was this?
I graduated in 1992.
So this is like the end of Macho's run in WWE.
Yeah, it was right after it was shortly after he'd beat Ric Flair at WrestleMania.
Yeah, for the title, right?
Yeah, so we got to walk. I got to walk through the same tunnel that the wrestlers walk through to come out to this.
That's amazing, man.
With the Macho Man theme music playing over, and that was that was so much fun.
Yeah, so 1990 for me, I was 9, turning 10 a month. Actually, I was going to turn 10 a month from this day. Actually, my birthday's May 1st, so I was 9, turning 10. I was definitely hardcore wrestling fan at this point now. Actually, I'm wearing a WrestleMania 6 shirt right now as we speak on the. Now, this is actually a bullshit shirt though, because even though it says WrestleMania 6, though, there's no Hogan here. There's Warrior and there's Savage, and then you have Hart Foundation and Boss Man, and so I think they just threw in WrestleMania 6, and but I also think it's also around the time this shirt came out around the time where Hogan and WWE were not really on speaking terms. So I think they made some modifications, or whatever. Yeah, but it is what it is. Still a great shirt nonetheless, though. But a little bit of it's lying season here.
I thought Hogan was on vacation.
Yeah, he was on vacation for saying certain comments. Yeah. So anyway, so guys, watch, of course, WrestleMania 6. Of course, if you go to the WrestleMania portal on your Peacock, it'll be not chapter 6, it'll be episode 6, of course. The timestamp is 2 hours, 48 minutes, and 35 seconds. So you'll probably see Rick Rude walking off the ramp with Bobby Heenan at some point. So if you need to pause this podcast, do so this time. Otherwise, you're ready to go. We can get this party started. We're going to watch Hulkamania not come to an end, but Hulk Hogan will become immortal after this night. So there is a positive for Hogan losing this match against the Warrior. This is actually why I always say one of my most heartbreaking times as a wrestling fan, because I was never a big Warrior guy. I was Hogan first. I was always Hogan first, Savage second. Obviously now I'm Savage first now. But back then at 9 years old, who didn't know any better, I was a Hulkamania to the bone. I mean, I literally sweat red and yellow. So, also, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, for me, it's funny because I started out that way. I started being a fan around like 1985, 86. So I where you were in 1990, I was
86.
1986. And at this point, I was kind of done with him because,
In 90?
yeah, well, because
Wow.
here's the thing, right? So, because I had seen him beat all of these people, right?
Mhm.
And then now, and I was an NWA fan also, and
That's
then
true. You were actually on the other side too. Also, you were down
so
down
what
south.
happens
Also,
is like those early years where you know was fine, and then he started beating guys I'd been watching from like you know Ted DiBiase who I'd watched in the UWF, and he beat
true.
Boss Man who I was watching the NWA.
Yeah.
He was starting to beat these guys that that were cool guys from other places, and then and then I was kind of like, you know what, and then he and then of course he beat Savage at WrestleMania 5, and it just gotten to the point, I guess for me, um, and then he beat Bad News Brown. Bad News Brown was a guy that I've become a big fan of, right? So he's beating he's beating these people,
All your favorites, and I think at this point for you,
beating a lot of people I
you are
like.
smart enough to business point now. You're smart enough to business point now a little bit.
Yeah, so he started beating a lot of people who I'd liked, who I'd seen in other places, and then also they had him beat Savage like a drum after WrestleMania 5. I
Yeah,
mean,
all
he
that.
just beat him up
Yeah,
and down anywhere and everywhere,
yeah,
and to me, that was a bit much.
yeah.
And they had him beat Savage so many times after WrestleMania 5,
Was
and
one. I was wondering if they rebooked that. Would they, if you took the booking of today or even like modern day wrestling, like if you rebooked that, would you let Savage win that match and maybe Hogan win it back at SummerSlam? Because take
nah, I think you had to win it. He had Hogan, no, because the whole build up was to WrestleMania 5, so Hogan had to
right,
win there.
right, yeah,
I'd have moved him on to somebody else sooner. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
I mean, they just kept going with it, and just
Well, it kept going. But it kept going because of Zeus.
yeah, and then the fact when they brought Zeus back, and that was like around they brought him back in like December for another match,
Yeah.
or
Oh,
they
no, no,
did the same,
well, yeah, and then they did the Zeus stuff until February, and then did the main event, which all it was leading up to this Hogan Warrior thing.
and then they had to beat him
Um,
again there,
right,
right? And
which was
then
pissing me off.
it was overkill, and so I was like, okay, come on, do we really gotta keep doing this?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
so at that point,
Well,
and
15-year-old Rob, of course, at this point is probably pissed. I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all, brother.
yeah, so it's like I mean, and then like I wasn't like a huge Warrior mark, but I thought he was pretty cool, and I liked him well enough. And also the fact that going into this match, the fact that he physically could matched up with Hogan.
Yeah,
So I was hopeful that they would do it.
yeah,
I was hopeful that he would beat him. And also, again, as somebody who at 15, I was like, I'd gotten a little smart to the
yeah.
things,
Correct.
and at that point, Hogan was winning. He was winning every match the exact same way.
Well, except one match, except one.
Which one?
The Genius, the Genius, in
Oh,
'89 on Sunday Main Event, 1989, November edition. He did lose to the Genius by count out.
okay. But when he did win, like at that point, it was literally the exact same way. He would
Yeah,
get out of the finisher, he would Hulk up, he would do the three punches and the big boot and the leg drop. He was winning every match the same exact way.
it got old. In other words,
And whereas like earlier on, like 85, 86, he didn't win the same match every way. I mean, he didn't win every match the exact same way. Um, Early on. Like, I mean, he would do the leg drop, but there'd be, there'd be other things going on. There'd be more back and forth, and he wouldn't just do the three punches and the big boot and the leg drop. And, and so there was at least some kind of variation early on. But by this point, like, it was the same thing every time.
yeah,
And just, I was done.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. All right, again, timestamp, of course, 2 hours, 48 minutes, 35 seconds. Again, if you need to pause, do so this time. Otherwise, when it gets party started, we'll do some commentary. We'll do some open-ended conversation about anything and anything, towards the match or anything else in this world. So anyway, we get this party started in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right. So as I start this, I want to give a quick little shout out to my cousin Cecil. Should I say heavenly shout out to my cousin Cecil, who passed away last year. He is actually today's his birthday, #1, posthumously, his first one since his passing last July. He actually is the reason I got into wrestling in the first place. Now, he wasn't involved in this. By this time, he stopped watching wrestling, but he was heavily into wrestling in the mid 80s, between 86 and 88, 89. I remember the story. I always told a story on this podcast many times over about how how he discovered wrestling. Like he recorded WrestleMania 3 on a VHS. Back in the days, kids, when you used to record stuff on TV or whatever, he recorded it, and it was kind of cool because that tape was staying as VCR all the time. Okay, and it was standing outside, like not inside, but outside. And in his room, it'll say WrestleMania 3, March 29, 1987, in bold black Sharpie. Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and one day I just pressed it. One day I came over to the house at 7, 8 years old. Went over to the house, started watching it, and the rest is history, of course. Whereas he stopped 2 years later because obviously he was 3 years older than I was. I continued, and I still to this day at 44, turning 45 in 2 months, continue. so shout out to Cecil, my cousin. I love you. We miss you, and yeah. You were the reason why I got into wrestling the first. Still watch this shit this day. So anyway, so here's right here the build up here. This is the main event we just discussed a little while ago.
Yeah.
Where the main event was, so the card was Hogan and Savage on one match, and then it was Warrior and Dino Bravo. And of course, you see the earthquake there. They're teasing that because after they get through this match here with Hogan and Warrior, that will be Hogan's next opponent, next feud for next close to next year.
Yeah,
Hogan and so again, long-term storytelling here. They used this thing here, this little thing here. They used this as a reason Hogan might have lost the match because Earthquake tried to cripple him before the match, and his Warrior trying to save him. That clothesline, jeez.
Yeah, and Warrior was just like he was like pure energy, man.
Yeah, and remember, guys, these are the two biggest baby faces in the company. Not two of the two. One can argue that Warrior at this point was either on level Hogan or some may even say slightly bigger.
I wouldn't say bigger. It's just I think there were people interested in seeing him beat Hogan.
Yeah, but here's, okay. So, and this is something I me and our good old friend and cousin and comrade Duke Bennett, we argue about a lot, both on air and off air. The reason I have Warrior as my number one greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time is because he was the only guy that made that belt feel on par with the world title. And what I mean by that is this whole match, this whole build-up. At 10 years old and 9 years old, I thought the Intercontinental Championship was on level with the World Championship because of how big Warrior was. Because how big a pop he was getting.
And I mean, he was main eventing house shows at the point, defending the Intercontinental title, and also they had him beat Andre a bunch of times.
Yeah,
and that, so that itself put him on a higher kind of plane. And his there he is running to the ring, and he's blown up by the time he gets to the ring.
And by the way, one of the cool things about this is also Jesse Ventura's last WrestleMania on broadcast. So Jesse for years has been the anti-Hogan guy.
Yes.
This is the first time you hear Jesse be 50-50 at least. Like he's actually a little more pro Hogan in this match than he's ever been. And it's not that he's anti-Warrior, but he's playing the whole Hogan's the veteran and this and that, and the wily veteran who has the experience, and so Jesse's giving Hogan his flowers. And this is the only time you hear Jesse give Hogan his flowers in any match.
Yeah, and also, I mean, in kayfabe, Jesse didn't like the Warrior because in kayfabe, Jesse was a big Rick Rude guy, and the Warrior beat Rick Rude, and Jesse, went apeshit about that in kayfabe. I don't know.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't check it out.
Oh yeah, I mean, because when Warrior,
this surprised me for the record, but
Yeah, and so I'm talking about, and I don't know how Jesse wasn't, towards those guys in real life, but in kayfabe, he openly rooted for Rick Rude, and so he wasn't a big fan of the Warrior in kayfabe, off of that.
So you have the two differences of the entrances. You have Warrior coming there, running down the aisle, And of course, this is Skydome. It's not something like small, like Raw, SmackDown,
Yeah,
like brand. This
right.
is Skydome, and there's Hogan calmly, and you'll hear Jesse here make note of that. Like, Hogan's just calm, cool, collected, taking his time down, the experience, da 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 da. The commentary is genius here though by Jesse and Gorilla, because this is why they're my favorite team all time, because they knew how to tell you good nuanced stories.
Yeah, and they're still my number one
Yeah.
from this commentary team because
Yes.
I mean because to me Jesse is the way you should be a heel commentator. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, he's a heel, but you don't overdo it.
Yeah.
And if the babyface does something good in the match, you say he did something good, right? And Jesse would do that. He wouldn't just crap on everything the entire time to the point where it felt like he was, where it felt contrived.
And
Which
he'll do it to troll Vince too. Also, like, you see it, I'm called like I see it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, and so to me, that's the way you should be. Like a lot of heel commentators, they just overdo it, and and it just feels contrived and almost fake, kind of.
That's one of the only things I mind about Bobby Heenan, and I love Bobby Heenan on commentary, but he overdid it. But at the same time, because he was a heel manager, he kind of had to, I guess.
Yeah.
So
So then, I mean, I think so. With that, I didn't mind because he was a heel manager, even though, and like when Jim Cornette would be on commentary,
yeah,
the same thing, but he was a heel manager. But when you have somebody who's just like not an active wrestler or manager on commentary and they're just playing heel commentator,
hmm
then I just, yeah, gets to be too much for me sometimes. A lot of those folks.
is that Dave Hebner?
I think so.
Yeah, that's the Mister the referee. So he didn't get fired for taking the money.
That's what's funny. Like they did the whole controversy with him and being, with that, and then like a year or two later, it's like, they just basically, expected us to not care.
Yeah, that's Dane Davis, for example of that. Dane Davis was the worst referee in the history of referees, and literally a year later, he's like refereeing wrestling match. Like, weren't you like the quick referee that lost his job and now you're back already?
Yeah.
Come on, Vince. We're not that stupid. By the way, also stupid me at 9 years old. For years, I thought Warrior was bigger than Hogan in size and in like height.
No.
Kind of find out, no, Hogan was.
No. Hogan was. I don't know if he was legitimately 6'8", but he was definitely like 6'5", 6'6" at least.
Yeah, I used to think Hogan was on smaller than Warrior. I was wrong.
But Warrior was not some short guy himself either. I mean,
No, 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 no. Of course not. But to tell you how big Hogan was, though.
yeah. And of course, when Hogan stood next to Andre, that's why it was even more astonishing because, you
Yeah,
know,
Andre is so big.
yeah. And now they're locking up, and then
Yeah. By the way, this is you want this is not going to be a technical. This is not going to be a technical specimen here, but the
no,
way this match told a story was brilliant. This is a phenomenal main event.
because
Phenomenal main event.
the story here was that these were the two strongest, or two of the two strongest guys. So them doing anything involving strength was just is what you came here for.
Yeah.
And so they did all that. And now they're doing the test of strength, which is something you don't see very often anymore.
Yeah.
But here it's like such a big deal here because of the two guys doing it.
Yeah. So I heard for years that Hogan was open to the idea of turning heel around this time. I don't know if it was the Hogan idea or if Bruce Pritchard wanted to do it. But there have been talk internally that they wanted to turn Hulk Hogan heel, or he wanted to turn heel around this time to kind of refresh his character. Because to your point, you said that by 90 you were kind of done Hogan at this point. So folks like you, older than I was at the time, I can see that. But then I'm sure Vince was like, "No, we got a lot of money, a lot of money to be made here with this guy." And honestly, in hindsight, they did the right thing because
Yes.
as we become to know in years later, Warrior's title reign after he won this match here was not as successful as they thought it was going to be, and they still need Hogan to draw. Hogan was still the bigger draw, even without the title.
Because like Warrior didn't they didn't find out until after he won the belt, but kind of those intangible things that matter, and he didn't really have those.
But what is it? Okay, this is what I don't understand though. Warriors built to the title, red hot. From the time he won the IC championship in SummerSlam '88, this dude was fucking red hot.
Yes.
Okay, and then the minute he wins the title, he just cools off. I don't. Was it the wrong matches? What was it that happened?
I think one they he went right back to feuding with Rick Rude, and those were good matches, but he had already beaten Rick Rude a bunch of times. They had just feuded the year before. Um, so I think that was part of it.
So it's bad booking.
Um, well, but I understand why they did it, because he and Rude had a lot of good matches together, and they had good in-ring chemistry. So,
Mm-hmm.
y- and Warrior, you had to put him with somebody he had. If you didn't put him with somebody he had good in-ring chemistry with, then it was terrible. So you had to put him with somebody who he had good in-ring chemistry with. So I understand why they would want to do that, but it was also, repetitive. And then, and then also it's just like when he was really just those kind of incoherent promos, they became more glaring when he was the world champion, because now there's more people paying more attention to you, and just those incoherent promos. And Hogan was a better communicator, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
even though there was people like me who were kind of tired of him, but you know, he was just better at the job. I mean,
Yeah.
and you saw
He
that,
knew
like,
he was a company man. He knew how to do the company things in ways that Vince could have confidence in. Warrior couldn't do that. And on top of that, Hogan, for all the shit about Hogan in hindsight about him politicking and creative control and all this stuff, he was a better locker room guy and more respected than Warrior was, and actually respected the business in ways Warrior did not in comparison. So I think that's why it was probably a lot of the internal things became bigger and bigger and it became more obvious. And by Royal Rumble 1991, they say, "Nah, get this belt off this guy."
well, yeah, and then so because I mean, and then also, yeah, I mean, Warrior just was flat out not drawing at the same level, and um,
But can I argue a lot of the reason why he wasn't drawing the same levels because of the fact that around this time the business at this point started to get stale. Like
oh well,
they
well,
weren't.
that's
So
another thing.
I don't think I don't know if this was a Warrior problem. I mean, it might have been a problem with just the whole wrestling in general.
Well, because honestly, I'd say from like 1990 up until the NWO started in '96,
Yeah,
the business had cooled off everywhere.
correct.
So yeah, you can attribute some of that. Yeah, I mean, so no, it's not all his fault. You can't put the blame all on him,
Hmm.
but they had cooled off pretty quickly after he'd won the title. So definitely there was definitely some cooling off on his watch, but you can't blame it all on him. No,
Right.
because again, like I said, the business was cooling off. Like all the territories and other companies, it was at this point it was down to them and the NWA. What was left of the NWA,
Right. Right.
and that was it. And so like the business had cooled off, and like because what happens is like because a lot of those territories went under. Like they were people who were mainly fans of those places, and they might have watched some WWF along with that, but they were primarily fans of those other things. And so when those other things are gone, you know, they weren't that interested in continuing to follow things.
Real
Like
quick, real quick, this whole thing with the Hogan's knee here, by the way. Was this a work? Or was this real? Because I thought it was real at one point. He hurt his knee.
um I mean he did a good job of selling it. So
Yeah. Because again, if this is fake, fantastic storytelling.
yeah. And but because like for example when I was going back to the business cooling off. Yeah, because when WCW went under in 2001, there were people who were WCW fans, even if they flipped channels during the Monday Night Wars.
Mm-hmm.
There were people who were primarily WCW fans, and when WCW was gone, they were done. So, uh, in around this time, all of the regional territories were gone. So if you were a fan of, World Class down in Texas, they were just about dead. If you were a fan of the AWA, they were
Yeah.
at this point they were dead. And so many other places were just gone at this point. And so the business started drying up, and so people who would have watched the WWF alongside those other things,
Yeah. Yeah.
once those other things were gone, they tapped out. Because they weren't interested in only watching the WWF.
Right. Right.
Um, which is why so the business was drying up. Not to get political here, but in the early '90s there was a recession, and people just didn't have the same amount of disposable income that they had previously had.
That's right. After the Gulf War. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that play into it. And and so there are a lot of reasons. But what happens is, look, if you're the top guy when that happens, then you get saddled with some of it.
It's kind of like politics, man. Even though it may not be your fault, but if you're the guy in charge at the time things happen, then you get the fair or unfair. You get the blame for it.
And
Go ahead.
and because the same thing happened with Brett and Sean, right? I mean, did
Hmm.
Brett and Sean were they the cause of things being not so good?
No,
I'd
not at
say
all.
no, but them and Diesel, like, they were the guys who were world champion while it was so bad.
By the
Yeah.
way, for all the shit Warrior gets for being really bad in ring, and rightfully so, he has two, and I would say arguably three really good WrestleMania matches. This one, of course, here with Hogan. Okay, he had the one the very next year against Savage, which was one of my favorite matches of all time. And of course at 5 against Rude was pretty good.
Yeah.
So we give Warrior shit for being a bad worker and this and that, and a lot of it makes sense and it's rightly so. But he did come through in big matches when he had to. And granted, a lot of it had to do with who he worked with, because Rick Rude, obviously a phenomenal worker. Hogan, we know how great a worker he is. Savage, one of the greatest of all time. But he did put on his boots when it mattered.
Yeah.
Takes two to tango.
Yeah, exactly. And it does. So you got to give him credit for those three matches. And as long as they put him in there with somebody who could lead him through the match and all of that.
And Hogan's in this match. This is all Hogan.
Oh,
Hogan is doing all the details, like the knee thing, the whole, like right here, the long holds. That's all
yeah,
Hogan, because you make Warrior do the whole 20 minutes. You can't get 20 minutes out of Warrior just doing a technical match. It's not gonna happen. You got to
yeah,
do things like this. And Hogan, this is all Hogan.
yeah, and you can't call it in the ring with him and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, or you can't improvise, I'd say. Um, but yeah, I mean, and so it's just that when you got him away from somebody who could lead him through the match,
Right.
the results often were not very good,
Right.
and it was why they had him do. I mean, they had him do so many squashes, or even when he
Yeah.
when he wrestled Andre, Andre wasn't in great shape at
But
that point.
that was probably more of an Andre problem, I think, at that point. That was Andre
Yeah,
selling something else. Yeah. And I think also too, they did that at that point to make him look strong, because I think they knew by November of that year, because that feud happened in the late '89. They knew by that point that Warrior Hogan was going to be a thing. So you get him
yeah.
through Andre. You beat Andre pretty clean and pretty quickly, makes look strong, and then you get to Hogan.
Oh yeah, because Warriors match at main event of Survivor Series in '89. He went on last.
That's true. He did. He did. Is Warrior building up now?
Yeah,
Yep. Um, we spoke about this on the last watch line we did on the Rumble, 1990 Rumble with me, you, and DJ. There was talk also that the original idea for Mania 6 was Hulk Hogan and Mr. Perfect. Perfect in 89 and going into 90 was red hot too. Also, he was arguably the biggest heel in the company at this point.
Yeah, but I think this was the
Him
right.
and Savage were 1A, 1B when they call it, but Savage had gone to the Macho King thing, whatever. But Perfect was on a come up, like especially late 89. I mean, Hogan and him feuded in late 89. It was a good feud, but it never got further than what it did because again, because DJ made a good point in that episode. He said that they could have built Perfect to be a foil, and I think Warrior wasn't as big as he was at this point. That might have been the main event at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I just think that would have been a hard sell because I don't think that many people would have believed Mr. Perfect would have had a real chance of beating him. Whereas here, this really was going in like, man, I don't know.
This is literally the first. This is Rock Austin. This is the first version of Rock Austin. You know what I'm saying? You don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this one, yeah, I mean, like you really didn't know because there were no like mitigating factors. Like if you were smart to the business at WrestleMania 3, you knew Andre wasn't gonna win because you knew what kind of bad shape Andre was in physically. If you were smart
as a kid, now 7-year-old me,
now I
didn't that way.
Yeah, I was 12. I was 11 at WrestleMania
3.
WrestleMania 3. So I didn't know it, right? At that point I didn't know. And when they brought out like the giant size belt for Andre, should he win the match, that put plenty of doubt in my mind at 11 years old, right? Because like they made this like giant size championship belt for Andre in case he wins, right? And they probably showed it on TV like only one time ever, right?
Yeah, I saw that one promo him and Bobby. They were showing the belt that if he wins the belt, there's a really large belt is made from him. So they're trying to put all these old teases here and there.
So at 11 years old, I thought there was really some doubt in Hogan being Andre. But if you were smart at all and you knew what type of shape Andre was in, you knew he wasn't gonna win. Yeah. But here, even if you were smart to the business, you didn't know. Like here you did not know. If you were totally smart and in tune to the business, like you really didn't know here how this was gonna go.
By the way, folks don't realize this also was title versus title. This wasn't just a championship match. Actually, if Hogan won this belt, had won his match, he would have become also Intercontinental Champion as well. Which was weird booking because like, how do you like so when Warrior won this match, obviously they made the IC title vacant about a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
Which Perfect won the title tournament for that. Why didn't you just keep both of them? What the fuck?
Well, because the whole double champ is, and I've said this before in some different conversations, but double champ is only good for that one visual of you walking out of the ring with both belts when you win the match, the big match.
And that's a big visual too. Also for Warriors, that he had both belts.
That's the only thing it's good for is when you win that
the visual
and you're holding both. Yeah, when you're holding up both belts, that's all it's good for.
Yeah.
And then after that's a problem. It's a booking problem and everything, which is why they usually do vacate one of them almost immediately. And
let's do a little bit of fantasy booking real quick though. Let's say Hogan wins this match against Warrior. Hulk Hogan Intercontinental Champion sounds so fucking weird. It does.
Yeah, and he probably would have vacated it and
immediately. Like, that's not for me, brother. It was for me, brother.
Yeah, and then you would have, and then of course you would have been like, well, then what was the point of all of this?
Yeah, it was all about the moment. Vince knew. And again, we're looking at it from the innocent eyes of a 9-year-old myself, turning 10 in a month. I'm not seeing it that way. As an adult, I understand it. It's about creating the moment for Warrior or whoever won the match. In case it's Warrior, and seeing the moment him holding both belts. And obviously, he's going to pick the one that matters more, which is the world title. And it's a reminder that belt was still the bigger belt. It's a reminder.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, I think Vince they knew that some people were starting to get tired of Hogan, and so this was a time where you needed him to take an L.
But
if he had won here, then people would have really gotten tired of him. People,
they'd have
been done with him if he'd won.
In hindsight, this is the right move. In hindsight, is the right move because You get a refresh. We
Yeah.
spoke. I mean, we also spoke about this, Rob, many times over on many watch alongs we've done. 89, 90 WWE roster, arguably one of the greatest rosters of all time. You had a lot to work with at this point now. So Hogan, and we also saw Hogan at the title for once before a year prior, and it worked with Savage as title as champion.
Yeah.
So Hogan can still be Hogan without the title. He had to the point now where he was bigger than the championship now. So he didn't need to have the title on him.
But now the tricky part about that is the person you put the belt on still has to prove themselves worthy of it.
Would you say Savage did?
I would say Savage, yes, when he was champ during '88, and yes, I would say yes.
Would you say who else had the title? I would say Slaughter did a decent job with it for that 3-month haul.
Yeah,
2-month haul.
but I think everybody knew he.
Yeah, it's a bridge.
His whole purpose was to lose it to Hogan.
Right.
But if you're gonna if you're gonna take the belt off the biggest name and put it on somebody else, that person they gotta be worthy of basically doing what you did, and because we're seeing that now I mean, Cody's had to prove that, and I think he's done a good job of it because if Cody was if Cody had been in, let's say if just
See Hogan won. See Hogan won. He should have won. See he won.
and
See,
so Hogan
won.
gets
That's twice he won now.
yeah, he gets his visual 3 count here.
Yeah.
And which I mean, and see today, the IWC would call that politicking and whatnot, but that's good booking. You're supposed to,
Yeah.
you and now see what Warriors get, and then but Warrior gets his 3 count here also. So, because
and
you're
his is
trying,
more fair. His is like 1, 2, 3. Whereas Hogan's quick out of his, like
yeah, I
Hollywood.
mean, but they're doing this match. I mean, regardless of the outcome, you're trying to, you know, one of the points of this match is to show these two people as equals.
Yeah.
So you gotta, yes, so that's why you give Hogan the 3 count while the ref was knocked out, and you give Warrior a 3 count while the ref was knocked out, because this match is that you're supposed to come out of this match seeing these two guys as equals.
Yeah.
Not like, okay, Warrior beat Hogan, ding dong, the witch is dead. That's not how you're supposed to see this. You're supposed to see these two guys as equals coming out of this.
Speaking of equals, the crowd was 50-50 in this match.
Yeah, and
What a match! This is such great storytelling here, man.
yeah,
Good Lord.
and and see now, the IWC brain fan would say this match was not great because they weren't, doing a bunch of flips and 450 splashes and whatnot.
It's not the point, though, guys.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean,
freaking tassels.
yeah.
Can't stand tassels.
Well,
I hate
because
tassels.
he started, I think when he was in World Class, he was the Dingo Warrior.
Yeah.
As when he started wearing that getup that he has on now.
Yeah.
And of course, before that, he and Sting were like another Road Warrior knockoff team. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
The Blade Runners. They were like, if you were like to rank the Road Warrior knockoff teams, they were probably at the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, Demolition became a great team in their own right, as much as I rib you guys about them. And the Powers of Pain were fine, but the Blade Runners, because they were both super green and not very good. And they would tell you that. Sting would tell you that himself. I mean, and then here's where I was like, oh shit, here we go again, because he kicks out.
This is why this is brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it was a brilliant bench, because he had and it's literally the same way he's been winning all of his matches for the past year.
And look at the crowd too. Also, like all pissy. Look, some people who root for Warriors. Like, oh god, not again.
Yeah, because this when I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me! They're gonna do this shit right. Here we go, and then at this point, I had almost resigned myself to like, oh, he's gonna win.
Yeah. Jesse's commentary is great. He's like, Warrior's never seen this before. Great storytelling on all accounts here between Gorilla and Jesse, Hogan and Warrior, everything here. That sick leg drop.
And right there, when Warrior moved, that's when I jumped out of my seat, because when he moved out of the way of the leg drop, that's when I'm like, oh, he's gonna do it.
Yeah, and by the way, Hogan tried to come out on 3. See that? Hogan came out try to
yeah, and
out on 3,
but
which is smart. Again, smart looking though.
But the thing about it, that's another one of those things. Like today, again, IWC brain fan will say that's insulting and that he was, not playing ball or whatever. But that was actually back then. It wasn't looked at that way back then. And this is, I'm taking this from Jim Cornette, who is an authority on 80s wrestling as much as anybody, of course, because he was a big part of it. And he even said, no, that's something you do. It was something basically to signify that the guy had just barely got you.
Remember, supposed to look equal.
Yeah, exactly. And
a lot of people criticize this move here, about Hogan trying to steal a spotlight by giving them the title. But no, this is significant. This is Hulk Hogan has been the face of this company for the last 6 years now. He's handing off. This is literally changing the guard moment. This is Magic to Michael, NBA Finals, 1991 Finals. He's changing. This is the changing the guard. Or it's supposed to be anyway. But I'm handing you the reins of the company to you now. You're not running with this now. He's putting Warrior. This is how you put a guy over.
Yeah,
especially when you have 2 baby faces, especially here too. Also, now if Hulk was a heel, different story. But no, he's not a heel here.
Right.
Look at Warrior put Hogan over.
And look, Hogan, and he left right after that. He gave him the belt, and then he didn't stand there in the aisle and clap for him.
Right.
Like he left.
To me, it just makes Hogan even bigger. Honestly, I would say I just make Hogan even bigger because,
Well, it did, and then within a few months, even though Warrior was world champion, people still saw Hogan as,
equal, not more, bigger.
And which is why it was very smart last year after Cody won. People give Roman crap for, being part-time, whatever. It was the best thing they could have done was for Roman to leave for a while.
Yeah. You see Warrior showing Hogan's respect.
Yeah.
I always like that moment. And here's the moment. This is 2 titles. Also, this is the first WrestleMania where you had Pyro.
Oh yeah, and
it fit because of who he was.
Yeah, and so this match, it did everything it was supposed to do. It was, again, because if Hogan had wrestled Mr. Perfect, I don't think it would have drawn like this, because I don't think
no.
It would have just been another Hogan feud, right? And there would be no doubt in the outcome. But this was 2 guys who were presented as equals. The ending was in doubt up until the very end.
They keep showing Hogan.
Yeah, and because I think my guess is that the original plan, they probably was going to do a rematch the next year
in 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you don't do all this. You don't show Hogan in the little ring being carried away and all that. You don't do all of that to never do a rematch.
I'm actually glad that they didn't do that. Let me tell you why. As now we end this here now. I'll tell you why I'm glad they didn't do that. Because even though Warrior was a disappointment as a champion, his reign as a championship was a disappointment. You don't want to rub salt in the wound. There was still value in Warrior being a top guy. Not but a top guy. And having this match again, I think at 7, would have hurt that even more.
I mean, so if they had done it at 7 and say Hogan won it back.
Yeah, it would have hurt Warrior more. That's not rubbing salt in the wound.
Yeah, because I think that would have almost, because of how things went.
That would have probably buried Warrior more, to be honest with you.
Well,
because Warrior, there was still value in Warrior just not being the top guy. There's value in being one of. back to what he was before winning the title at 6. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I think if they had him come back and just been, because then that would have almost been like an official announcement that Warrior was not that guy.
Right.
And they still wanted, they still wanted to kind of keep him up there as high as they possibly could. But I mean, of course, they eventually they moved on from him at the Royal Rumble a few months prior to. It's just, I mean,
But him and Savage tore house down in 7 though, so
yeah,
there's
I
still
mean,
value there. And Warrior feud with Taker, half of that, and that was a good feud for a little while. But Warrior's issues was more internal at that point now, where he held up the company for money and SummerSlam and all this shit. So yeah, it's just
yeah. So
so
it was just,
Warrior and they hurt himself in the end.
yeah, and then basically, yeah. So he did, and so the things that you know hurt him in the long run were
Yeah.
probably evident when he at this point or shortly after this point.
Yeah.
And then, and then also again, like I said, when he was kind of those promos he was doing as those kind of rambling, incoherent promos and whatnot. Well, they weren't a big deal when he was the Intercontinental Champion and Hogan was on top. They weren't as big of a deal, right? But when you're up there, now it matters, right?
Yeah. Which again was why all the shit we give Hogan for who he is today. Hogan was the guy, and he did it for a long time. I mean, it's hard to do that job. It's not for everybody, and for Hogan to do it for 8-9 years. I mean, it was really 9 years from 84 to 93. You got to get credit for that, man. So, before I let you go, obviously phenomenal match. Not a technical specimen, of course, not a Brett and Shawn, that stuff. But if you had to put this, I know we're going to do this at some point next month or so, you and I, and maybe some other guys, of main event matches, where would you put this match among the greatest WrestleMania matches? When I say main event overall, go right ahead.
Okay, so we have basically 40.
40-ish, because it does.
Oh,
And
because
by the
it's
way, well, by the way, here's the thing goes. I'm discovering now, looking into do some research. So real quick, perfect example, WrestleMania 21. They don't consider John Cena and JBL a main event.
well, no, because it wasn't on.
They consider the main event Triple H and Batista.
Yes, and which for me the main event is main event was goes on last. So if you have 2-night WrestleMania, then both of the matches that go on last each night are main events. I don't subscribe
unless they specify
no,
the main event. So
no,
Savage
no,
Flair was the
no,
main
not,
event.
I don't see. I don't count that. Okay, I don't count that.
So if you're doing a draft right now and I pick Savage and Flair, that don't count.
Oh well, I guess. Oh well, okay. No, I'm not going to tell you can't pick it. No,
Because they build it. So this is my point though. So okay, so like on the WrestleMania 8 build, like on the card, like the actual visual, it shows Sid and Hogan and then Savage and Flair, the main event. On WrestleMania 18, Rock and Hogan's the main event supposedly, but it's not. Apparently, the main event is Triple H and Jericho. But on the promotion, it's Rock against Hogan. So and yet Jericho and H went last. So which is the main event? I would say Hogan and Rock, or go double on that one at this point.
Well, see, I won't because that's one that they that's one that has been talked about as people when we talk about matches that should have been the main event. That one gets talked about like that. So,
but it's also built as such though on the build, like on the visual, you don't see Jericho and Triple H anywhere on that card. Like you don't see him like on the front on the headline. You see Rock against Hogan, icon versus icon. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
It's complicated.
I guess
So if we do a draft, do we include those matches that they build, or do we go based on what's last? Because
Well,
I don't know. I kind
well,
of have a
all right.
little
Put it
two
this
ways
way.
looking at it.
I'm not. If you want to pick one of those, I'm not gonna call a foul or
Right.
or debate with you over it.
Right.
But
Because I agree with you on the last match main event. I agree with you on that. But then when you start telling me that Icon against Icon is the visual of WrestleMania 18. Okay, I don't see Triple H and Jericho nowhere on that thing. Okay, even though it is the last match of the night because it's the world title match. And then, but then again, if the world title match do matter, then why isn't Cena and JBL considered a main event ish match? You know what I'm saying? It's complicated.
yeah, well, because to me, like especially in later years,
Yeah.
now, yeah, like within the last 10 years or so, when they say double main event or triple main event, it's bullshit. It's a way of trying to placate some egos and all of that stuff, and because like for example, as a SummerSlam 2023, they say triple main event.
Did it for real?
Yeah, because Roman and Jay that was the last match, but then I think they said also the triple main event was that, and I think Cody and Brock Lesnar, and
I don't remember that actually being billed that way. Wow,
yeah,
interesting.
it was, and it was like, so it was Roman and Jay, and then Cody and Brock Lesnar, and then they had a triple threat for the SmackDown Women's title, right? And so they said triple main event, and it was just one was like, no, like stop it, it was just, like please, you know, and yeah, it was just, yeah, and
That's crazy though. I don't know, man. That
so I think, yeah, I think it's just that's a lame attempt at kind of.
so you wouldn't consider Cena and JBL a main event match?
Well, so you're saying they did bill it as a main event match?
No, no, no. Would you wouldn't consider their title match a main event match, even though both
No,
world
no,
titles
no.
are?
If they didn't even bill it as a main event match, then no. I mean,
Let me see real quick. WrestleMania
'cause,
21. Let me
I
see.
mean, it's
Let me
'cause, I mean, it's debatable if they bill it as a main event match, then
Well, here's the thing. WrestleMania 8. They billed that show as a double main event. They said Sid and Hogan, possible last match, also world title match, other main event, Savage and Flair. That makes sense though, because the names involved in that.
yeah, and then also because yeah, and then uh,
See, there you go. See, so if you look at the front of the now, it's interesting because like WrestleMania 21's I should bring on the screen here, but I'm scared to do that. So you have like the visual here. On top is Batista and Triple H, right? Then on the bottom you have JBL and Cena, and then on the edges you have Shawn Michaels, Angle, Undertaker, and Randy Orton. So I see the Triple H Batista argument here too. Also, my thing is we look into both those titles as equal.
man, well, it's funny, right? Because they tell you that, but they rarely book them as equals. They're usually okay, like now, you know, um, Cody and Gunther are supposed to be equal, right? But you can just look at how they get booked, where they,
Right.
what spot they get on the card, that type of stuff.
Right. Sometimes it's obviously obvious.
Yeah. So, and how, I mean, yeah, it's just, if they only have one of the two on the show, it'll be Cody, right? Um, So yeah, just yeah, they're supposed to be equal, and they try to tell you that they're equal, but one is always booked, you know, higher than the other one, depending on who's holding it.
Yeah.
But now, yes, now the original question was where would I put Hogan Warrior, ranking as far as WrestleMania main events? Um,
And a match, of course, everything
yeah, well, okay, so all right, well, if we're just gonna stick to the last match of the night, and then so we've had 40 WrestleManias. And how many we've had the two-night WrestleMania, how many? 5 times? Yeah.
Yeah, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Yeah.
So that's 45 matches that ended the night. Now if we do want to throw in, okay, okay, we want to include the matches that were billed as double main events.
Which is
Okay,
like WrestleMania 8, for example. Yeah.
8, and then I think 7 was also. I think they called Savage Warrior double main event. I think
No. It was
they
Hogan Slaughter.
didn't.
It was Hogan Slaughter. No. Mm-mm.
Okay, never mind. Okay, so we got that's what like 51 matches.
They punished the Warrior for that one.
Oh,
You don't get the main event. You don't get the
okay.
main event. Although in hindsight, it was the best match of the night, though.
Oh yeah. But so okay, so 51 matches that were called main events.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, definitely in the top half, maybe top 10. Yeah, I mean, I have to sit down and really think about it and make a list. But just without thinking too hard, without sitting down and actually making a list, definitely top half, definitely top 15, maybe top
I
10.
I think it's definitely top 15. I think you can give it top 10. I think the only thing that hurts it now is that we've had some really great main events in the last couple of years. I've said that low key, these last 3 or 4 WrestleManias runs have been phenomenal. Not just the main events, but just in general. Like you go back to like Sasha against Bianca. You go back to the Cody Brock 2 years in a row. You go, you have Austin. Even though it wasn't a great technical feud, the story was phenomenal. Austin and KO. You know, Brock and Lesnar from the last one they did wasn't great because of the first off, I think Roman got hurt in that match. Um,
Yeah.
I would say the earlier matches of Brock and Roman better than that one. It was a good match, wasn't great in the same way was the other two were. Um, but if I'm looking at like it's definitely top 15. I could argue top 10. If I had to do a rankings and sit down and do a rankings, I might it could possibly crack my top 10 as a result. But to be comfortably, I'll say top 15 though, because especially when you look at the match itself was a great match. Number one, number two, the significance or at the time what it was, the significance of Hogan losing the title like the way he did, and what that was supposed to be moving forward. So basically, like we saw it last year. Now we're probably going to have a different result now in hindsight. When Roman lost to Cody last year, that was literally Hogan Warrior. That was literally that moment. Okay, Roman is pretty much giving the keys to Cody, and Cody now you have the run with it now. Same significance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and next up the difference is that Cody's actually viable in that position
Correct. I would
afterwards.
argue so far through 1 year, all the complaints about Cody's run as champion is much better than Warriors run as champion. But the
Oh,
moment
easily,
though,
yes.
yeah, but the moment though is comparable because Roman was Hogan in this role.
Yeah, and so I think when you if you're gonna rank like best main events, you also, I mean, the match itself and the ring work and all that matters, but also the significance of it. Like you know, nobody is gonna call Hogan Andre a great wrestling match, but
Mm,
the significance of it.
mm.
If you're gonna talk about, it's still I'd say one of the top 5 most significant WrestleMania main events. Hogan Andre.
Oh, it's easily. I would say top 3. I think if going further, that in terms of
Because
significance, if you rule out the match itself and all that, the way it was booked and the myth of it too, especially now so all these years later, it is
yeah,
definitely probably top 3 or 2. Somebody said number 1, and I want to argue with that because of what it was, because that mania changed the business.
yeah, and that was the one that was that match in front of that size crowd kind of certified where the WWF had gotten to.
Yeah, and we're here to stay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was, again, that was certification that was, no, this is not just a fad, right? This is
right.
like, no, this is, and it was a certification of Vince McMahon's vision
Yeah,
because that's what he had envisioned, you know, his wrestling show being in front of that size of a crowd. That was his vision, and that people called him, crazy for having, and that was the culmination and like certification of that was maybe one of the ultimate, yeah, I was right, fuck you, okay,
yeah,
moments.
yeah. And to his dad for the record too, also because his dad didn't want him to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I
If you
mean,
watch, if you watch the documentary, I keep telling you to watch. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, because his dad was part of the old kind of territory cartel,
Right,
and
exactly.
and everybody, you respect everybody's corners and all that kind of
Of
stuff.
course, yeah, absolutely.
But here's the
So
thing, though, you couldn't. I mean, and during the '80s, what gets kind of lost in the conversation is that they couldn't, the business couldn't have continued on that way, um, because television was changing. Because professional wrestling used to be on local TV on like Saturday morning or whatever,
right,
right? And Saturday morning tele during the '80s, you know, Saturday morning television stopped being local. They first it went to, that's when you started getting syndicated TV. You started getting like Baywatch and the Star Trek: The Next Generation, and
yep, hmm,
um, there were all of these syndicated TV shows that were coming on Saturdays during the mid to late '80s, and so local Saturday morning television was gone.
right,
And, then eventually that gave way to basically infomercials. So you couldn't do that anymore. So you had to, and and Vince was the first person to syndicate, you know, his
right,
show nationwide. So he got on the syndication wave because that was the wave, and you know that local TV was going to dry up whether Vince did anything or not.
right,
So it was simply a matter of whoever got to that first
yeah,
was going to survive, and then he did it, and then you know Crockett did it on a smaller scale, but he managed to hang on for a while.
right.
But everybody else, they tried, but they got to it way too late, and so it became a thing that wasn't. It wasn't. Now of course Vince was cutthroat, shark about it.
Yeah, of
It
course.
wasn't. He wasn't polite about it, but the way he went about doing things.
Yeah,
But ultimately, if the business was going to survive, somebody had to do what he did.
right.
And WrestleMania 3 was that was the big culmination of that push. So that's still, I'd say, a top five. If you combine everything, I'd say it's still top five main event. I would say WrestleMania 6, definitely top 10. Um,
Yeah, 10 to 15.
th-
I have to do a list. I may do a list one of these days, but
yeah, me too. Now it was, well, I mean, well, now you got me
maybe
going.
maybe it's a Robert Genius thing now. RobertGenius.com.
Yeah, so now I gotta sit down and think about all this because it's ring work plus significance in history plus impact on the business.
I
Like,
do think if Warrior had a better run with the title, I think 6 gets even more pub.
oh well, yeah, because if he had a better run with the title, then they wouldn't have cooled off, and it would have been, yeah. I mean, it would have been, it might not cool off at all if he had a better run with it.
Yeah.
I mean, if he had gone on a Hogan run from 1990 to 1996, then Austin came in. You were talking about an uninterrupted run of you know success, basically, right? And
I don't think I think I'm touch. I think what we're saying is that nothing's touching 17. I guess, right? 17 is still the best. Well, WrestleMania 17 is the best. Is probably the best WrestleMania card ever. I would say in terms of like quality of matches. Is 17 the greatest main event? Possibly.
um,
It's
ooh,
up there, but I don't know if I put number one.
now for me, if we're just talking about the match itself, I wouldn't argue with anybody who put it at number one. Um, and the match itself.
Outside the ending, of course. People hate.
I
People hate
mean,
the
I
ending.
didn't. Okay, it's funny because everybody kind of craps on Austin turning heel
Mhm.
now, but I understand why they wanted to do it because they'd been doing Austin versus at that point it was 2001. They've been doing Austin versus McMahon for 3 years,
Yeah, 3+ years. Yeah,
and the thinking was that okay, it's better to get out ahead of this and change direction than hang around too long. And so I mean, it made on paper it made sense to try it,
right.
but I think the audience itself didn't want it.
And they
And
showed you that in hindsight after that whole run, he turned face pretty quickly, pretty much after like I think a couple months, I think.
yeah, and then they went to the invasion thing, and then that did not go well and all.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but it's just um. So I mean, yeah, just I would say if we're going to talk about the build and then the match itself, it's I wouldn't argue with anybody who put it number one. It's just the aftermath. Kind of it loses points because of the aftermath. Because it didn't have the effect that they thought it was going to. They
I might,
thought it.
I may do on my blog actually. I haven't wrote on in a long time. I might do a rankings of the WrestleManias. I think I might do that.
Yeah. I might just try to come up with like top 10 or ranking all 40 or ranking all 50 of them.
I might do I might rank all the I might rank all of them actually, but I still need to watch some of them. I still haven't watched all of them. I just watched for the first time actually ever. I watched the Triple H Roman Reigns main event from 32 um today. Yeah, it's not bad.
Well, I mean, it was a Triple H special. Um,
Yeah, of course, but he put him over.
it was 10 minutes too long. Now, what I mean by that
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Triple H has a lot of these matches that they went 30 minutes when if they went 20, you would call it an all time great match, but it went 10 more minutes than it should have, and then you're just kind of like,
Yeah, right. Anyway, Rob, plug me on plug, buddy.
Okay. So as always, you can catch me, DJ, and Jason on the Mindless Wrestling Podcast, and I'm proud to announce.
Oh, we got an announcement. Da-da-da-da-da!
Yes. So now, okay. I've talked many times about how Spotify for podcasters has screwed everything up for me for my own show,
Mm,
but I found a new tool to record things the way I want to record things
okay.
called WavePad, and I can go back to recording sections and putting them together into one show again.
About damn time. Good, good. And I saw you put
So
you put it up a couple days ago. I need to listen to it now, actually.
yes, so I am going now. I can fully make an effort to get back to doing things more frequently. So all of you who have bared with me through this time, thank you. If you've kind of lost track of me because I haven't been around as much, I hope that you'll start finding me again because I'm pledging to get back to doing things more frequently now that I can.
Right. Is that app also able to do guests also too? Oh
Um,
no. Oh no.
well, I can still. I mean, I can do a Skype recording and I think I can do a Skype recording and then load it in. So,
But if Skype goes away, we're gonna do now, buddy.
well, then I have to come up with some way to do some type of record audio, I guess.
There's a way to do it. There's many apps. I'll find something for you. I know there's things you can do it. Make it easy.
Okay, because if I got normally when I do have a guest, that's the whole show. I normally don't. I
You need
don't
to
have a guest.
clip. Right. True.
Yeah, I usually don't clip something else in when I have a guest. I usually go. We do the whole hour, and then
Right.
you know.
Right. All right. Well, congratulations, man. Robert Genius podcast. You check it out, of course, on Podcast Catchers, Mindless Wrestling Podcast, of course. And, of course, he's part of us now here with us on the podcast as well, Earnestly podcast. Also doing our watch-alongs and all the wrestling retrospective stuff we do all the time. He's my number one guy to go to, him and DJ, because, I mean, it's one thing to find guys that are, like, probably of younger than me, whatever. But if you're, like, the same age range as I am, a little older, and experienced that stuff back then, it's a lot more authentic, in my opinion, to have those, those shows who live. Like, for example, we actually lived WrestleMania 6. We didn't just watch it in hindsight. We lived it. We were actually part of that whole watching it in real time. So it's a different perspective, of course, than saying like some other people like in their 20s and 30s who may obviously know what happened and watched it. But there's a different layer when you have like the experience of watching these shows too. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, Rob, good job as always, man.
Thank you, man. Good to be back as always.
You got it, brother.